Have you ever looked at your partner and wondered, how did we get here? Once upon a time, everything felt so full of love, laughter, and endless possibilities. But over the years, something changed. The person you once couldn't live without suddenly feels distant, like a stranger. Maybe it's the little things that slowly built up, forgotten promises, the silent treatment, or the feeling that your needs have become invisible. What once felt like love now feels like a burden you're carrying alone. You're left wondering, did I change? Did they? Or has life worn us down in ways we never saw coming? In today's video, we'll share the emotional journeys of real women who found themselves at this very crossroads. Stories of love, betrayal, disappointment, and one final twist that may just make you rethink everything you thought you knew about long-term relationships. Stay with me, you won't want to miss this. Have you ever looked at your partner and thought, how did we get here? Once it was all love and laughter, full of possibilities. But over time, something changed. The person you once couldn't live without now feels distant, like a stranger. Maybe it's the little things, forgotten promises, the silent treatment, or feeling like your needs have become invisible. What once felt like love has slowly turned into something heavier, something harder to carry. You're left wondering, did I change? Did they? Or did life just wear us down in ways we never expected? It's a question more people ask than you might imagine. Today we're stepping into the stories of three women, Linda, Sarah, and Emily, who found themselves at that very same crossroads. Their experiences are raw, emotional, and painfully relatable. But there's a twist in each of their journeys, a moment where everything changes, and it may just challenge how you think about love, loyalty, and what it means to stay in a relationship. Linda and her husband Tom were once inseparable. They shared everything: weekend hikes, long conversations over coffee, and lazy Sunday mornings filled with plans for the future. Tom was active, vibrant, and full of life. But over the years, something shifted. Smoking and unhealthy habits crept in, and soon the man Linda loved became a shadow of his former self. Then came the snoring, loud and relentless. At first, Linda thought it was just part of getting older. But night after night, the noise became unbearable. She tried earplugs, sleeping on the couch, even suggesting Tom see a doctor. He refused every time. The result? Linda's sleepless nights began taking a serious toll on her physical and emotional health. Every night was a battle, and every morning felt like an uphill climb. What once was love began to feel like obligation, and Linda couldn't shake the growing sense of resentment. Sarah's story was different but just as heartbreaking. For years, she carried the weight of their family on her shoulders, raising kids, caring for aging parents, managing every household detail. Her husband, on the other hand, spent most evenings on the couch, glued to his phone or lost in his favorite TV shows. At first, Sarah told herself it was fine. She was strong. She could handle it. But little by little, resentment crept in. Every unwashed dish, every ignored plea for help, every evening she spent juggling 100 responsibilities while he sat comfortably on the sidelines felt like another crack in their marriage. Soon those cracks turned into walls, and Sarah found herself wondering if her husband even noticed how much she was drowning. And then there's Emily, a woman who believed her marriage was unshakable. She and Dave had always been close, sharing everything: dreams, challenges, and triumphs. They were partners in every sense of the word. Or at least that's what Emily thought. But something had shifted. Dave grew distant, always on his phone, distracted, his attention elsewhere. Conversations turned into short exchanges, then into silence. One night, driven by a mix of curiosity and fear, Emily picked up Dave's phone. What she saw left her breathless: a string of texts with another woman. Flirty, intimate messages she never thought she'd see. Her heart sank. In an instant, everything she thought she knew about her marriage was thrown into question. How long had it been going on? Was this just a fling or something more? Most importantly, what was she supposed to do now? These stories aren't just about loss and betrayal. They're about the silent battles so many couples face, the moments of doubt that creep into long-term relationships, and the choices we're forced to make when love no longer feels like enough. Stay with me, because what happens next may just change how you see love and commitment forever. Linda never thought her marriage would become a test of her patience and resilience. She had always seen herself as a supportive, loving wife, willing to stand by Tom through anything. In their early years, they were the kind of couple that others admired. Always active, hiking on weekends, cooking healthy meals together, planning adventures. But over time, small changes started to creep in, subtle at first, then harder to ignore. It began with Tom's smoking habit, something Linda had once brushed off as a stress reliever. But as the years passed, that casual habit became a daily ritual. The smell of cigarettes filled the house, lingering on clothes, in the furniture, and in the air. Linda begged him to stop, not just for her own comfort but for his health. At first, Tom promised he'd quit. "Just one more pack," he'd say with a grin. But that one more pack turned into a never-ending cycle of broken promises. The snoring came next, loud, guttural, relentless. What started as an occasional disturbance soon became a nightly nightmare. Linda tried everything: earplugs, sleeping on the couch, even moving into the guest room. Nothing worked. And here's where things took a turn. One sleepless night, Linda found herself searching online for solutions. Amidst the usual advice, weight loss, sleep studies, she stumbled upon something she hadn't considered before. Could Tom's persistent snoring be a sign of something more serious? Sleep apnea, heart disease, even early signs of chronic illness? When she confronted Tom with this possibility, she expected him to take it seriously. After all, this wasn't just about her lack of sleep, it was about his health, maybe even his life. But Tom dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand, laughing it off as paranoia. "You've been reading too many medical blogs," he joked. But Linda couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Weeks later, they were at a family gathering when Tom suddenly collapsed. Panic swept through the room as everyone rushed to help him. An ambulance ride and a night in the hospital later, they got the diagnosis: early-stage heart disease exacerbated by years of smoking and untreated sleep apnea. The doctor's words hit like a hammer: "If you had waited much longer, it could have been fatal." The plot twist? Even after all that, Tom still refused to change. "I'm fine," he insisted. "The doctors always make it sound worse than it is." Linda was left with an impossible question. Do I continue fighting for his health, knowing he won't listen? Or do I let go and focus on my own well-being, even if it feels like giving up on the man I've loved for decades? The house, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, now felt heavy with unspoken words and unfulfilled promises. Every time Linda caught a whiff of cigarette smoke, it felt like a slap in the face, a reminder of every conversation ignored, every plea dismissed. And yet, there were moments when she still caught glimpses of the old Tom, the man who used to surprise her with coffee in bed, the man who once hiked mountains with her without breaking a sweat. Those moments kept her hanging on, hoping for change that never came. Linda's story isn't just about snoring or smoking. It's about what happens when one person refuses to change, no matter how high the stakes become. It's about the slow erosion of trust and connection, the daily battle between love and frustration. But here's the real controversy. At what point do you stop fighting for someone else and start fighting for yourself? Many people might say, never. Give up on your partner. But others, those who've lived through nights like Linda's, might quietly disagree. When love turns into exhaustion, when compromise becomes sacrifice, is it still love? What do you think? Would you keep fighting, or would you finally walk away? Stay with me, because Linda's decision may just surprise you. Sarah had always believed that marriage was a partnership, a union where two people shared not only love but also the responsibilities that came with building a life together. For years, she tried to hold on to that belief, even as reality painted a very different picture. A mother of 2 teenagers and a grandmother of 3, Sarah had long been the backbone of her family. She woke up before the sun rose, packing lunches, managing school schedules, cooking meals, and caring for her aging parents. Her husband, Paul, on the other hand, seemed to drift through life with little thought about the weight she carried. Most evenings, Paul could be found glued to the TV, a plate of food in his lap, completely detached from the chaos surrounding him. At first, Sarah brushed it off. He works hard. He deserves to unwind, she told herself. But as the years passed, her patience began to wear thin. One night, after a particularly exhausting day, Sarah came home to find the kitchen a mess, the kids fighting over homework, and Paul laughing at some sitcom as if the world around him didn't exist. Something inside her snapped. "Do you even see me?" she blurted out, her voice trembling with frustration. Paul looked up, startled. "What are you talking about?" "I help out," he said defensively. But Sarah couldn't hold it in any longer. "Help out? When? Between your TV shows? While I'm juggling everything else?" It was a fight they'd had before, but this time felt different. This time, Sarah didn't back down. She listed every chore, every responsibility, every burden she had carried silently for years. Paul sat there, stunned, unable to respond. But even as the argument ended, Sarah knew deep down that words alone wouldn't change anything. She'd been here before, promises of "I'll do better" that always faded as quickly as they were made. And here's where the twist comes in. Months later, Sarah overheard a conversation between Paul and a friend. He was laughing, recounting their argument as if it were some silly misunderstanding. "She gets so worked up over little things," he said, dismissing her pain as if it didn't matter. In that moment, Sarah realized something she had tried to ignore for years. Paul didn't see her sacrifices as sacrifices. To him, her endless efforts to keep their family afloat were just part of her role as a wife and mother. The betrayal wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't an affair or a sudden act of cruelty. It was the quiet, insidious kind, the kind that creeps in when someone you love takes you for granted. Sarah felt invisible, like the love and respect she once thought defined their marriage had been slowly replaced by apathy. One day, during her weekly book club meeting, Sarah decided to open up about her struggles. What shocked her wasn't just how many women related to her story, it was how many of them had accepted their situations as normal. "That's just how men are," one woman shrugged. Another added, "If you leave, you're just trading one set of problems for another." But one friend, a widow named Joan, leaned forward and said something that stuck with Sarah. "You don't have to leave your marriage to reclaim your life, but you do have to stop waiting for him to change." That night, Sarah sat down and made a list, not of chores or responsibilities, but of everything she had sacrificed over the years. Her hobbies, her friendships, even her health. Slowly, she began to rebuild the parts of herself she had given up. She started taking yoga classes, saying no when she felt overwhelmed, and even booking a solo weekend trip to the mountains. Paul didn't understand at first. "What's all this about?" he asked one evening as Sarah packed her bag for a trip. Her answer was simple but firm, "It's about me." The plot twist? Sarah didn't leave Paul. Instead, she stopped expecting him to validate her worth. She created boundaries, reclaimed her time, and found joy in things outside of her marriage. And as she grew stronger, something surprising happened. Paul began to change. Slowly, he started to notice her absence, her independence, and her newfound sense of purpose. He even joined her on a hike one weekend, though he grumbled about it the entire time. Sarah's story raises a controversial question. Is it possible to fix a marriage without fixing your partner? Some might say she should have left, while others see her choice as an act of resilience. What do you think? Can boundaries and self-respect breathe life into a dying relationship, or are they just a band-aid for deeper issues? Stay with me because the next story may challenge everything you think you know about love and loyalty. Emily had always believed in love, the kind of love that grows stronger with time. She thought she had found it with Dave. 4 years they were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences, laughing at inside jokes, and planning a future filled with shared dreams. They were that couple everyone admired, the ones who seemed to have it all figured out. But somewhere along the way things changed. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. At first, it was just a little less conversation, fewer shared moments. Dave seemed distracted, constantly scrolling on his phone or glued to sports on TV. The long, intimate talks that once defined their evenings were replaced by silence. Comfortable at first, then stifling. Emily tried to ignore it. "We've been married for years," she told herself. "It's normal for things to settle down." But deep down, she missed the connection they once had. Then came the night that changed everything. Dave had gone to bed early, leaving his phone on the kitchen counter. Emily wasn't the type to snoop, but something about the situation gnawed at her. She picked up the phone, her heart racing as she unlocked the screen. What she found left her breathless. A series of texts, intimate, flirtatious messages, between Dave and another woman. The words on the screen blurred as Emily's mind raced. How long had this been going on? Was it just harmless flirting or something more? Every assumption she had about her marriage was suddenly thrown into question. When Dave woke up the next morning, Emily confronted him. His initial reaction was predictable: denial. "You're reading too much into it," he said. But as Emily pressed him, the truth began to unravel. It wasn't just innocent banter. The messages had been going on for months, and the emotional intimacy Dave shared with this woman was something he hadn't shared with Emily in years. The plot twist? It wasn't the affair that hurt Emily the most. It was realizing how long she had been lonely without even acknowledging it. The betrayal was devastating, but it brought something deeper to the surface, a painful truth she had been avoiding. Their marriage had been crumbling long before the affair ever happened. Friends and family had their opinions. Once a cheater, always a cheater, some said. Everyone makes mistakes, others countered. Emily felt trapped between those two extremes. She loved Dave, or at least the version of him she had once known. Was that enough to stay? Or would staying only deepen the wounds? At first, she considered leaving. Late at night, she would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining a new life without him. But then she thought about their shared history, the home they had built together, and most of all, the life they had built for their children. In the end, Emily made a decision that surprised even herself. She stayed. Not out of weakness or fear of starting over, but because she believed their story wasn't finished yet. But staying came with conditions, hard boundaries, and a demand for real change. Dave had to own his mistakes, go to counseling, and rebuild the trust he had shattered. It wasn't easy. Some days were filled with progress and hope. Other days, Emily wondered if she had made the right choice. Trust, once broken, isn't something you can glue back together overnight. But something remarkable began to happen. Slowly, through honest conversations and uncomfortable truths, they started to rebuild. Not the marriage they had before, but something different. Less idealistic perhaps, but more grounded in reality. Their story sparks a question that divides people. Is forgiveness a sign of strength or a recipe for more heartbreak? Some would say Emily should have walked away without a second thought. Others might see her choice as an act of courage, a testament to the belief that love can survive even the deepest betrayal. What would you have done in Emily's place? Could you forgive and start over, or would the betrayal be too much to overcome? Stay with me, because our next story delves even deeper into the hidden cracks that can tear a marriage apart. And trust me, it's one you won't want to miss. Michelle and Greg had what most people would call a solid marriage. For years, their physical connection was strong, a central part of their bond that brought them closer. They had their ups and downs, sure, but intimacy was always their way of reconnecting, of reminding each other that despite life's stresses, they were still in this together. But then, slowly, things began to change. At first, it was small: Greg coming to bed later and later, too tired to talk, let alone anything more. Michelle noticed, but she didn't make a big deal of it. He's just stressed, she thought. It'll pass. It didn't. Months turned into years, and what was once an occasional issue became the new normal. Greg's physical affection disappeared almost entirely. The man who once couldn't keep his hands off her now barely touched her at all. Michelle tried to be understanding. After all, middle age comes with its own set of challenges. Stress, health issues, lower energy. She told herself it was part of life. But something else was happening too, something Michelle hadn't expected. While Greg's desire faded, hers only grew stronger. In her early 40s, Michelle found herself in the prime of her confidence and energy. She felt vibrant, alive in ways she hadn't in years. She started working out regularly, eating better, and focusing on her own self-care. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly attractive, and she wanted to share that part of herself with Greg. But every time she tried to reignite the spark between them, she was met with rejection. "Not tonight, I'm tired," Greg would say night after night. Eventually, Michelle stopped asking. The rejection hurt far more than she let on. It wasn't just about sex, it was about feeling desired, feeling seen. Slowly, doubts began to creep in. Am I still attractive? Does he even notice me anymore? Or is this just how marriage fades as we get older? And then the twist. One day, while cleaning the house, Michelle stumbled across Greg's old phone. It had been sitting in a drawer for years, and curiosity got the best of her. She unlocked it, scrolling through messages that hadn't been deleted. Her heart stopped when she saw an exchange from 3 years ago, flirtatious messages between Greg and a woman named Allison. Michelle's mind reeled. Was this why he had pulled away? Was this the real reason behind his distance? When she confronted Greg, he admitted to it, an emotional affair that had lasted several months. He swore it never became physical, but to Michelle it didn't matter. Emotional betrayal felt just as devastating. What hurt most was the timing. The affair had taken place during one of the most difficult periods of their marriage, when Michelle had been juggling a new job, the kids' growing schedules, and her own struggles with self-esteem. She had needed him more than ever back then, and instead of leaning in, he had turned to someone else. The betrayal opened up old wounds that Michelle didn't even realize she had. But here's where things got complicated. Greg had ended the affair long ago, long before Michelle ever found out. For the past 3 years, he had been trying to rebuild their connection in his own way. He just hadn't told her the truth. Michelle was left with an impossible choice. Do I throw away everything we've built because of a mistake from the past? Or do I acknowledge the effort he's made to change and try to forgive him? Some friends told her to leave immediately. Others said that emotional affairs are different, that people make mistakes, but it doesn't mean they don't love you. Michelle struggled with that question for months. On the outside, life went on as usual. She smiled at PTA meetings, cooked dinner every night, and kept the household running like clockwork. But inside, she was torn between the life she had and the life she could create on her own. In the end, Michelle made a choice that surprised even her closest friends. She decided to stay, but on her own terms. Greg had to agree to counseling, to be honest about everything moving forward, and to put in real effort to reconnect emotionally and physically. Michelle, in turn, decided to stop waiting for Greg to define her happiness. She booked a solo vacation to visit an old friend, signed up for dance classes, and started writing again, something she hadn't done in years. Their story raises an uncomfortable question. Can a relationship survive after the spark fades and trust is broken? Or are some cracks too deep to repair? Some might say Michelle's choice was brave. Others might call it naive. But one thing is certain, her decision forced both her and Greg to confront the truth about their marriage and decide if love was truly enough. What would you do if you were in Michelle's shoes? Could you forgive and rebuild, or would you walk away and start over? Stay with me, because the next story takes an even darker turn, one that might just change how you see long-term commitment forever. Carol and Jack were the picture of happiness when they first got married. They were young, full of dreams, and determined to grow old together with a life full of shared adventures. In their early years, they traveled often, dreamed of starting their own business, and spent endless hours talking about their plans for the future. But as the years went by, life slowly got in the way. Careers demanded more time. Bills piled up. Their dreams of adventure gave way to practical concerns: raising children, paying off the mortgage, and taking care of aging parents. Before they knew it, their lives had become a series of routines, each day blending into the next. Carol felt the change most profoundly when they reached their 60s. Their conversations had shifted from talking about plans and dreams to discussions about doctor's appointments, medication schedules, and who would take the car in for service. The vibrant connection they once shared seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a quiet resignation. At first, Carol tried to reignite the spark. She suggested small trips, weekend getaways, even taking a dance class together. But Jack wasn't interested. "I'm too tired," he'd say. "Maybe next time." The plot twist came on a cold autumn afternoon when Carol found an old photo album tucked away in the back of a closet. It was filled with pictures from their early days: Jack smiling on a beach, their honeymoon in the mountains, the first house they bought together. As she flipped through the pages, a strange mix of nostalgia and sadness washed over her. She realized something that stopped her cold. The life they had once dreamed of was gone, and it wasn't coming back. That night, Carol sat across from Jack at the dinner table and asked him a question she had been afraid to ask for years. "Are you happy?" Jack looked up from his plate, surprised. "Of course," he said. But there was hesitation in his voice, the kind of hesitation that only comes when you've grown so used to your life that you've stopped questioning whether it's what you truly want. Carol pressed him. "Really? Because I'm not." The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. Jack didn't know how to respond. And in that silence, Carol finally spoke the truth she had been holding in for so long. "I don't want to just exist anymore, Jack. I want to live again. I want to feel something." For weeks, that conversation hung in the air between them. Jack seemed lost, unsure how to handle this version of Carol, the woman who had always put everyone else's needs ahead of her own, now demanding something for herself. And then, one evening, something unexpected happened. Jack walked into the living room with a suitcase in hand. For a brief, terrifying moment, Carol thought he was leaving. But then he smiled, a real, genuine smile she hadn't seen in years. "I booked us a trip," he said. "It's not much, just a weekend by the lake. But it's a start." The plot twist? That weekend became the beginning of something new, not a return to the carefree days of their youth, but a fresh chapter rooted in their shared desire to find joy again. Carol and Jack's story isn't just about aging or fading dreams. It's about the quiet transformations that can happen when two people are willing to confront the hard truths about their lives and choose to change together. But not every couple is willing to take that step. Some grow apart and never find their way back. Others, like Carol and Jack, discover that it's never too late to rewrite the story of their lives. So here's the question. If you realized the life you were living wasn't the one you dreamed of, would you stay and try to rebuild, or would you walk away to chase something new? Some might say that staying means settling. Others believe it's an act of courage, a choice to fight for what's been lost. What do you think? Stay with me because in our final story, we explore one of the hardest truths of all. What happens when love simply isn't enough? Jessica never imagined that physical changes in her husband Dan would affect their marriage so deeply. When they first met, Dan was vibrant, fit, energetic, always dressed well. He had a spark that drew her in, and she admired his confidence and passion for life. But as the years passed, things began to change. Dan stopped taking care of himself. His once well-groomed appearance gave way to messy clothes and unkempt hair. He gained weight, started drinking more, and ignored his health entirely. At first, Jessica tried to be supportive, encouraging him to see a doctor and make healthier choices. But her words always fell on deaf ears. "I'm fine," Dan would say. The turning point came one night when Jessica couldn't take it anymore. Dan's snoring had become unbearable, forcing her to sleep in the guest room just to get some rest. His breath, once sweet and familiar, now carried the harsh smell of alcohol and cigarettes, a constant reminder of how far he had let himself go. The man she had once found irresistible now felt like a stranger. Jessica knew it sounded shallow, but attraction mattered. It wasn't just about looks, it was about feeling connected, feeling like her partner cared enough to invest in their relationship, in himself. And right now, that connection was gone. Then came the twist. One day, while sorting laundry, Jessica found an old gym membership card in Dan's pocket. She realized he hadn't been to the gym in over 2 years. Something clicked. She wasn't just frustrated with Dan's appearance. She was grieving the loss of the man he used to be. He had stopped trying, stopped caring, not just about his health, but about their life together. When she confronted Dan, his reaction shocked her. He admitted he had felt lost for a long time. "It's not that I don't care," he said quietly. "I just didn't think it mattered anymore." Dan's honesty opened a door Jessica hadn't expected. Instead of walking away, she made a different choice. They set goals together, small ones at first. Evening walks around the neighborhood, cutting back on drinking, cooking healthy meals instead of takeout. Slowly, Dan began to change. Not because Jessica demanded it, but because he finally saw how much his choices had hurt her. Jessica's story raises an uncomfortable truth. When physical attraction fades, is it fair to expect your partner to change? Or is love supposed to be unconditional no matter what? Some would argue that love is about acceptance, while others believe it's reasonable to expect mutual effort. What do you think? In Jessica and Dan's case, facing the hard truth brought them closer. But not every couple finds their way back. Some drift apart for good. Stay with me. Our final story takes us to the hardest decision of all. When is it time to let go? Rachel's story is perhaps the hardest of all. For 15 years, she poured everything into her marriage, her energy, her love, her dreams. She believed that by giving her all, her husband Jason would rise to meet her halfway. But no matter how much effort she put in, Jason never changed. Jason wasn't a bad man. He wasn't abusive, nor did he betray her trust in any dramatic way. But that was the problem. He did nothing at all. While Rachel juggled raising their kids, managing the household, and working full-time, Jason drifted through life without a plan. He spent his evenings playing video games, his weekends drinking with friends, and rarely thought about the future. When Rachel asked him about his goals, what he wanted for their family, his answer was always the same: "We're fine as we are." But they weren't fine. Their home, once filled with dreams of renovation and improvement, had fallen into disrepair, just like their relationship. While their friends moved forward, building better lives, Rachel felt stuck in time, held back by Jason's refusal to grow. The turning point came on Rachel's 40th birthday. While her friends celebrated their milestones with heartfelt gifts and family trips, Jason handed her a generic greeting card. No special plans, no thoughtful gesture, just a quick, happy birthday before he went back to his game. In that moment, Rachel felt a sharp clarity. He's never going to change. The twist? Rachel didn't leave immediately. Instead, she made a quiet decision that changed everything. She stopped waiting for him to become the man she needed. Rachel focused on herself. She rebuilt her social life, reconnected with old friends, and started pursuing a passion for photography she had abandoned years ago. She took small steps toward independence, not because she wanted to leave Jason, but because she refused to lose herself any longer. At first, Jason didn't even notice the shift. But as Rachel grew stronger, more confident, something unexpected happened. He began to realize how much he had taken her for granted. He tried to change, but by then it was too late. Rachel's story isn't just about disappointment, it's about the difficult choice between holding on and letting go. In the end, Rachel chose herself. She left the marriage not out of anger, but out of love for the person she had almost forgotten, herself. These stories aren't just about broken relationships. They're about resilience, about facing the hardest truths and deciding how to move forward. Sometimes that means fighting for what you've built. Other times it means walking away with your head held high. But there's no one-size-fits-all answer. Every relationship is unique, shaped by years of shared memories, challenges, and love. What matters most is that you choose what brings you peace, whether that's staying and rebuilding or letting go and starting anew. So what would you do? Would you fight to save the relationship, or would you walk away to reclaim your life? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you found these stories meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support means everything. It helps us continue creating content that matters. Remember, it's never too late to take control of your happiness. Thank you for watching. See you next time.